Drage gledalke, cenjeni gledalci, dobrodošli. Nocoj smo prvič omogočili spletni ogled dokumentarnega filma Greta, ki bo na sporedu vse do 5. maja. Na Zoomu, kjer letos pretežno komuniciramo, se nam je medtem ob tej priložnosti pridružil režiser filma, ki ga boste seveda lahko tudi sami kaj povprašali. Z nami je Nathanom Grossmanom. Nathan, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Toni.
Actually, you did a lot of movies before. You did also movies on different environmental topics. But in the August of 2018, you heard about manifestation in front of Swedish Parliament. So you were there looking for this girl you haven't met before. What impression did you get that day, and how Greta responded when your friend sound technician wanted to put the microphone on her?
No, but like many documentary films, this actually started with a tip. I got a tip from a friend of mine who knew Greta's family a little bit, that she was going to do some kind of a small manifestation outside the Swedish government. And this was, we had an election year in 2018. And I discussed it with my boss, and we were like, yeah, maybe it's worth going down to see who this activist is and do some kind of a recce. And when I went there, she was sitting completely by herself, and outside the Swedish government, it's like a very narrow street and it's not very friendly. So I went up to her and presented myself, and told her that I, might just be there for like a day to see who she was, and she was very, shy, and of course much younger than she is today. Then she was just 15 years old, and but she still had that Greta-ish, very direct kind of way, which I think struck both me and the sound technician, that she wanted us to like stay away a little bit, and she just wanted to speak about climate change, and if we wanted to do something about that, then we were kind of welcome. So she was, it was a special person already from the beginning.
I heard that you're a big pessimist in the office, so you used to shoot the film yourself in low resolution mode. When did that change? When you saw all the media attention and the children marching on the streets across the globe with the message, "We belong to Greta"?
Yeah, I think it's also so funny now, and I think that's what's so interesting when it comes to, the past and the present. Is like when you look back at something, you kind of just laugh at it. But then, this was such a small thing. And I felt, of course, I saw from that it became like a media phenomenon fairly early on, but it was still very Nordic, and the strikes were small. When she started striking in Sweden, we're talking like 40, 50 people on these kind of meetings, and then it spread a little bit to Norway and to other parts of Sweden. We're still talking like some 100 children. So I was like, this is domestic. And if I can save myself half a day of backing up memory cards, let's just save some space. But of course, when the strikes suddenly started to become massive, I think that was in the winter, suddenly, kids in Australia and Belgium started to strike. And then there were like tens of thousands of kids going out on these marches. Then I understood that, okay, this young girl's message is really translating to an international kind of world, and with that we should actually start to film this for a cinematic experience.
How did you actually get her confidence and also the confidence of her parents? Because I guess you were not there every Friday, but still you somehow managed to get inside of her head. And media can't do that, but movie can present her inner monologue when she combines these speeches and interviews.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I wanted to do. I felt from, as I said, fairly early that, there was some media around her, and there were lots of these very short interviews that make the kind of bread and butter of journalism today. And I felt, okay, I understand a little bit about her, but I don't understand this very special mind. And I understood that that's where the cinematic experience that I wanted to do was going to focus on. So I, in the beginning, of course, it was hard to know where the movie was going, but I tried to explain towards her, and also as she was a minor, towards her parents, that I was interested in following this for a long time. I was not there, just for the day or just to do some short piece. I was there to see where this was heading, and I was interested in Greta and how she saw the world much more profound. And I think being transparent about that, and also with them seeing me, coming back during many of these months when actually these strikes weren't very big, and where the interest wasn't very big, they understood that I was genuinely interested in her, and I think that built the confidence for her to kind of share her story with me.
I guess it's really hard to be a public figure when you have 15 years, and she's also presented through some media and through some public leaders as an angry, screaming girl. I wanted to ask you, how did you try to get all the dimensions of Greta? Because she feels approachable in the movie. There are more sides to her. Of course, we get the all insight of who Greta is.
No, but I think the biggest thing as a documentary filmmaker for me, as well as many, is curiosity. And I think I tried to just stay curious because this was such a rocky road and things changed all the time. And I had no idea, where she was going, where these strikes were going, if they would disappear or if they would take over the world, So I just tried to stay curious on how she perceived every day and moment when I was with her. Because as you said, as a filmmaker, you're not with them all the time. You're there, a few days every month, kind of, and I wanted to understand, to kind of stay in her eye level. So it was both like a mental idea of a dogma that I worked with as a director, but it was also something with the photography and with the sound design that we just kind of lowered everything into her world, and I think that piece by piece just felt like the only way to show all her dimensions. Because if someone has is neurodiverse, I think it's so hard to tell that story externally. I think if you want to tell that story, you probably need to just be curious of the person and try to tell it from that person's inside. If I would interview lots of experts about what is Asperger's and who is Greta and why is this movement big, I think that could be a great movie maybe in 30, 40 years when we summarize this, but not this time, I think.
Yeah, it actually looks like this is the prequel to the movie that will be shot probably in the next years. But also I wanted to ask you, why do you think it's so important to present Greta through these small details actually that are her everyday life? Because we also have to know that public figures are all human beings, and that is what makes them three-dimensional.
Yeah, I think, of course, Greta is a very special person. She's very young, but I tend to think that everyone, whoever in the public sphere, needs to be kind of treated with respect when you do a portrayal of them. And I think it's very easy for us today in a polarized world to just, in the media, want to make people one-dimensional. So we just tell one part of the story because that's much, easier, and that's what the audience loves. And I think that's something that we need to move away from. So on a more holistic level, I always think, whoever you portray, you have a responsibility of showing both the positive sides, the negative sides, both the, ups and the downs. And I think in the editing, we had all of those elements, and then we had a responsibility to combine that into the person that I knew, which was a person that both kind of had very hard times with this big burden of having the entire world on her shoulders, but also a person that was very creative, funny, and really enjoyed kind of blooming out through this activism. And I felt that both of those kind of sides needed to be portrayed, because in the media, I think we've sometimes just seen one or the other, depending on what kind of interest you have for the topic of climate change.
Actually, also really important was the interview that you made in her room when she was reading the parts of her diary, and that is the voice of the film. She's talking, think aloud. How important was that interview for you, and how did you try to prepare the scene and the setting to be as sincere as possible?
Yeah, it was I think I had filmed for maybe 7-8 months, and I had this vision that I wanted it to be scene driven, and that I wanted people to kind of move into the situations in her world. But then I was also like curious about hearing, because she always wrote her diary, and we had lots of interesting discussions on the trains, and I felt like more for research, I felt like now it's summer and we have some time. So I'll do a few interviews and we'll see, just like radio interviews in a room, and see where it heads. Because I had also seen that when she was interviewed by radio stations, it always felt a little bit more relaxed. I think that's maybe why podcasts are so popular today, because people are a little bit more relaxed when it's just a microphone. So we sat down a few days in her bedroom and talked about all these things that had happened. And she read a lot from her diary, and as you said, notes, because when she had scribbled down thoughts and ideas from the road. And when we played that in the editing, we were just like, wow, many of these things it's like they were written in these moments that we have captured, cinema verite, with the camera on the shoulder. And then it was just kind of, we just wanted to not to add too much of it, because then it becomes very talky. So we kind of balanced that out. But it was an amazing kind of treasure, those diary notes and interviews.
I actually wanted to ask you, where were you the most flexible when making this movie? But actually, I think I just got the answer. But you had to be, as a filmmaker, always flexible, especially with documentaries. Was there any special task also on this project, on Greta movie?
Yeah, but I think for me, I understood in this specific film that we had to be very, very flexible, not only creatively, because that's, as you say, always in a documentary, I think you have to be that, but we also had to be that technically, because we were following a movement which wasn't, a true grassroots movement. This was not Greenpeace or, an organization or anything. There were no contact people. Everything was organized by young people locally. It was, madness. So having, lots of hired, photographers and sound technicians and crew would have been impossible, but because they would need to go to the toilet, or they need to go home at 5 or whatever. And I understood that this needs to be done grassroots. So I have a background as a director of photography, which I left many years ago to direct. But for this film, I felt like I need to pick the camera up again, even if I think it's very heavy and not my favorite thing.
Great. Also, you get a really good insight into the whole movement. And I wanted to ask you, what was your impression on how much certain institutions latched onto her, knowing that they could use her to get a good public press coverage?
No, but I think many have kind of tried. And what's so interesting with her, and I think it's portrayed to some extent in the film, is how very strict she is to her values. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's fantastic. But I definitely think for her longevity of this activism, it's been really positive. That she doesn't want to do anything with political parties. She doesn't want to do anything with corporations. These marches and strikes are organized locally. There's no kind of overall Fridays for Future or climate strike organization. Every country has their own kind of style, which is so interesting. They're organized completely differently. In Switzerland, they're like super strict, and they have this like convention and everything. And in Sweden, it's much, much more loose. And in Italy, it's like more kind of, they do it like super big, just one time every year. So I think she and many of these young strikers understood that it's good to be grassroots, and okay, people try to latch onto us, but we don't need that. We don't need that much help. We can just, grab as many kids as we can and go to the streets, and that's what we do, kind of.
Yeah, I guess also the kids in Slovenia, we need to be proud on them. They were really also marching on Fridays, and it was great to see also the movement, as you said, grassroots movement gained a lot of attention also in Slovenia. And Greta seems skeptical to be in the spotlight. She knows that she's not a messiah, she's not a famous activist. And I heard an anecdote that she responded to the title of the film, because it's Greta in Sweden and also in Slovenia, but I Am Greta is the official title in the USA. And she said, as I heard, that it sounds like she's taking herself too serious.
Yeah, no, but it was, and I think it says so much also about these cultural differences of how you kind of perceive her and her story. And as you say, in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Slovenia, and many European countries, we wanted to call the film Greta. And in some other markets, it's called I'm Greta, or even more, have some, undertitles. And I think it says a lot why we choose this form of the film, because it's fairly strict, it's neutral, there's no drones, there's no technical shots. It's very, simplistic, this movie. And some people and some critics haven't even understood why. But I think she answers that fairly well with saying that even the title, which is I Am Greta, is too much fluffy. Why can't it just be Greta, and I think that says a lot about her way of perceiving the world. And that kind of the most simplistic and straightforward and on the point thing is always the right kind of road to go.
But also the whole concept of the movie, the way that you did it, there's no talking heads format. There's no a lot of people talking about her. It's actually an insight of Greta's mindset. And I also wanted to ask you, what were the responses from her to all those horrible comments from world leaders as Trump, Bolsonaro? I guess it's kind of hard to be 15 years old and to be attacked by that powerful man.
Yeah, I was very curious about that as well, because it was, starting to take place more and more during the year I followed. And I didn't kind of see how much she kind of reacted to it or talk about it, because it wasn't something she spoke much about. And then this scene plays out, and I think it's in Rome in the film, when she reads some of these attacks on her phone, which was very, it was not usual. And then I understood that, of course, why should you consume all that? It's not like you spend all your time reading everything that's said, that is expressed about you. And when she did, and in that specific time, it was, just these crazy ideas. It almost, in her world, became like a satire, because the things that were said were so like Illuminati, conspiracy, crazy. And of course, it was this interesting situation where she then, also very young, kind of just laughed at that. And her father was maybe a little bit more concerned, having a more parental and adult kind of worry about what was said. But I think it also comes down to that. And I think it's something I've heard from other activists, which is a little bit generational, that many of these young people that come from Generation Z, which is called, they've grown up with social media. So they're so used to this kind of horrific, horrible, that's the right word, horrible kind of tone on the internet. And it feels like some of them have understood that that's just like bullshit, and that people say things on the internet that they would never say in real life. And then that doesn't kind of, make it okay to behave in that way on the internet. But I at least hope and think that young people tend to have a better way of kind of tackling that.
That's an interesting view, and I hope it's true. Also, I wanted to ask you, how did you survive the trip across the Atlantic by boat? I heard that you were really afraid when Greta told you that she's looking to hitchhike over the Atlantic. And I heard also that you were quite scared when you were in harbor.
Yeah, no, I must say, I've been sailing a little bit in the Swedish archipelago. For you that haven't been here, it's very tiny. You practically see land everywhere. So I remember when she talked about this idea, I felt very scared, because I had, put myself in the situation of shooting the film myself. And I was like, oh, should I bring someone in now and tell her that I'm too afraid of filming this even? But I spoke to her and to the captain, and it seemed like it was going to be very kind of bumpy, but not necessarily dangerous. And then I decided, to go with her. But I remember in the harbor, I had seen pictures of this boat, but when I kind of saw it in real life, I understood that this is just, it's like a surfboard. General sailboats, they have like a V shape, so there's lots of boat kind of inside, like below the water. But this boat was just flat, because it should go above the waves. So when I saw it and went into it the first kind of day in the harbor, I was like, oh my God, like there's no space. Like this looks big, but it's nothing inside of this.
Actually, it took you 15 days or something, and you decided to fly back.
Yeah, I think we also had ended the film there, and we had been very we tried so hard during when we filmed in Europe to travel by train, and it became a part of the kind of production. But going back, we had to fly. It felt very kind of necessary to get the film done, back to editing. And I must say that I was very fed up with sailing, so there was no other option for me.
How hard actually was it to follow the standards that Greta set on environmental responsibility while you were filming in Europe? I heard that you had a problem in Copenhagen with one of the photos.
Yeah. No, but of course, like my standards and the production company, of course, we're a separate unit, so we if we could do whatever we wanted. But I felt that as I traveled with her, it was a big part of the production to kind of film those journeys. And when I started to travel by train, I actually felt that it wasn't that hard to travel them back by train. It felt like intuitive, how do you say it, to do and to go back by flying. But in Copenhagen, that story is a bit funny, and it says a lot about kind of how hard it is to follow these kinds of subjects. Because then we traveled on the train, and Greta, she's very meticulously with what she consumes and so on. But I've never planned my kind of food intake. It's a bad habit I have. So I just ran into some place in Copenhagen and bought a lot of like a salad and some sandwich. So there was lots of plastic containers. And when we had eaten the food, I just placed that on the table, and then she took like a picture and published it on Instagram that she was traveling, through Denmark, now on the way to Europe. And of course, all my plastic was on there, and she got so attacked, for using all these plastic, and you don't live as you preach. But actually, it was just me fucking things up, and I think it also made me even more knowledgeable and concerned with how important it was for me and the film to be a separate unit, and for me to never kind of intrude in anything she did, whatever it was good or bad, or even if she was, in any situation, she had to do her activism. I captured whatever I wanted to, and and I couldn't kind of interfere with that.
I just have to do a part in Slovenija. Drage gledalke, cenjeni gledalci, seveda je sedaj priložnost, da tudi sami zastavite vprašanje, in sicer nam ga zastavite tako, da v okence Q&A upišete vaše vprašanje, mi pa ga bomo seveda predvajali oziroma postavili Nathanu. Kar začnite, v naslednjih minutah je torej čas za vaše vprašanja. Hopefully we'll get also questions from our viewers. And I also wanted to ask you, I heard that your friends were laughing at you that you're making the impossible film. Because everybody has its own view on Greta's philosophy. How did you try to still be as objective as the filmmaker that is making documentaries can be?
Yeah, but I think, as I said in the beginning, I think it comes down to your own curiosity. And I think you can't make a film about anyone, and especially not about a person that's now active, in the public sphere, and think about what everyone else has in mind of her. And I was very curious about how she, as a young being that was just thrown into this crazy spiral because she was so good at speaking about this issue, how her kind of personal experience of that was. So I just tried to stay very focused on that curiosity, and not kind of fall into trying to tell someone else's story, either her, story of all the facts and figures and data. If Greta would have done this movie, it would just have been lots of statistics, or some, hate person that just would have liked to film plastic bottles being, like if she once had a clunk of a plastic bottle, that's not either kind of relevant. So I tried to kind of stay in my curious mid path, and I think that became also a very emotional film, because I'm interested as a filmmaker in those kind of emotional parts of being a human being and being an activist, and then it becomes much more emotional than the other styles of film.
Perfect, thank you. And we have a lot of questions actually from our viewers, and the first one is, what did Greta think about the film?
Yeah, but she when I had told her that when I had done my editing and I had my film kind of ready, she would be able to watch it to see if there was something that she totally didn't kind of recognize, if I have kind of misinterpreted her world. So we watched it in the cinema like an afternoon, and I remember after when the credits rolled, she of course said that it was very weird seeing yourself on this huge screen, but that she actually for the first time recognized herself in the portrayal. That always otherwise it's so simplistic and it was so much just a screaming young girl, but that I was able to show that nerdy person that she really saw herself as. So I was actually very happy, because it felt like that idea that I carried to make it simple and to make it in her world, that she actually saw that it was connected to how she perceived her life, and that was very, very that was an emotional time for me to hear that from her actually.
The next question from Queen. Can you tell us something about the shooting of the trip to New York, which looked like a very hard and demanding experience to her, and then the culmination in the UN speech?
I think I probably had some kind of a gut feeling that we were moving towards the kind of the third act of the story. It felt very much like we were starting to conclude what had happened. And of course, filming at a boat is very special because everything is shaking around, and it becomes and so when you kind of settle into a boat ride like that, it's very it takes some time. But what's interesting is also that it's a little bit like the film you've probably seen it, Groundhog Day, where everything is repeating itself, and that's how things are both in the pandemic but also when you're out at sea. So I actually filmed most of the material in the beginning of that boat ride, because after like a week or so, it was just, things had calmed down and everyone was just starting to settle in a little bit more to the sailing, and things were repeating themselves. So then I actually placed down the camera a little bit and did film as much.
So which part? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no. What did you ask?
Which part of that voyage to New York was the hardest, the first or the second week?
Yeah, definitely the beginning. I think like always in film, you take the most interesting and dramatic kind of parts, and I think that the last week and like the second half was much easier, and thus not as interesting, kind of having in a movie. But I think that's the thing with these boat rides. It's for both the body and mind to adapt to the new element of being, at sea and in this noise. That's what's kind of most heavy. When you've done that job, you kind of get into it. And I think, as I said, once again, I think the pandemic is probably something that we can all recognize in itself. The first kind of lockdown, the first uncertainty of what is this was probably hardest. Now everyone is used to Zooms and whatever.
What about the UN speech? Because I think that was also really important for Greta and also for you as independent filmmaker. It's kind of hard to get in all the institutions where you were during the shooting of the film.
Yeah, definitely. We worked very hard with getting getting good, great access to that specific speech, and I didn't know what she was going to say, and we didn't, as we were working very closely to capture this like as the last sequence. I didn't film with Greta herself. She was like preparing very closely the speech, but it wasn't something that I was documenting. I wanted the last thing to be like more, a grand finale, not to go into a new act of her writing a speech in Yala. So I remember I had no idea what she was going to say, and we had set up, I think, 7 cameras in the United Nations, and we had worked there for a few days, doing that setup. But no one, neither me nor the photographers knew what she was going to say. So we were all kind of looking through the viewfinder, just trying to, and it was just, you could just feel the tension in the room. Everyone knew that this, like, either this will be iconic or this will be nothing. And then I remember that I saw when she started to speak, like that all something, like she was almost like too angry to speak. It almost became like theatrical. And I understood instantly that, this will make history, because this is such an kind of strong words and so emotional in this specific setting. This is just crazy.
The next question from also our listener is from anthropological point of view, how much do you think your presence impacted Greta's behavior and actions?
No, but I think you as a documentary filmmaker, to some part, always have an impact on kind of, whatever you capture. But I think in this specific case, the thing was that there was such heavy kind of media attention from fairly on in the process. So I think she was never driven in any way to do this activism for my camera in that sense. If you follow someone and you're the only one kind of capturing their story, then it's easier, I think, that person starts to do things just because you're filming in a sense. But here it was much more like the world covering her. So she was, she was used to being filmed, and she didn't do this for my camera. Then you can ask, did she do it for all the cameras in that sense? Yeah, to some extent, yes. Because a large part of why she understood this was important was that she got attention and got her, message of how important and short time we have to fix the climate is. But I never felt that she did the activism for me in any way.
The next question is, was Greta ever tempted to direct the film a bit?
No, actually not. I think she had too much pressure on her own shoulders already. So I didn't think she in any way wanted to take over and do a feature film. I think in many ways she trusted me and understood that I was very kind of, as I said, curious about her life, and that I, worked, and we did, interviews with other people with the Asperger's syndrome to understand the diagnosis, and, that we were really kind of working on this seriously, and we were in this for the long run. And I think then she understood that that's the director's job, to interpret kind of someone's world, and that's not something you can do yourself.
Anje Libinger from Dnevnik is saying thank you for your very insightful evening. The documentary opens with Greta being at sea sailing, saying that what she experienced over the last few months is like being in a movie or in a dream. What is the significance of the scene for you? Why did you start with it?
No, that's a really good question. No, but I think it's my editors always say, and that's true, that when you make a film, the thing that you change the most times in the editing is the intro. And I think I've seen this film with like 100 different intros. But one day I remember that I was looking for, like in the diary interviews, I was looking for some like saying that I missed. And while listening to that, I suddenly heard her say this sentence, that everything is like a movie, like a dream. I was like, everything is like a movie, like a dream. And then they were editing the ending with the sailing boat at that time. And I was like, so I had seen those images, and now I heard that line. And then I just, I did it on myself on my editing station. I just, grabbed that line, shoofed down, and then I just grabbed one image because I didn't have time to editing, and I'm not an editor. So I just took one image, the best one from the sea, and then that line, and I just watched it. And I was like, whoa, this is like the metaphysical explanation of how mad this year, because it's like a year in a life portrayal in a sense, became. And in this interview, she says this so so metaphorically, and I think it became this perfect kind of intro to that the story that you're about to see shouldn't, it's actually, as I said, it's larger than life. It's not something you could imagine going into this. And I think that's something she really felt during this entire year, and it's something I felt was so true, because myself, I also felt that this wasn't, it could never have become like this. It could never become, sailing over the ocean, meeting the Pope, everything. And she said that, and it just clicked together with this imagery of the sea to become like a portal into the story.
Perfect. Thanks, Anže, for the question. The next question from Miha. Thank you so much to Nathan for joining us, and to Kinodvor, enabling us to see and broadcast such an important person as Greta and such an important movement. My question is, what did you learn when filming the movie and following Greta on her journey regarding climate change? What changes did you implement in your life?
No, but I learned a lot. Of course, I was curious on the subject and more like a not knowledgeable person on some extent of it. But I think I definitely understood two things. One thing was that even for me, a person who reads a lot, of journalism and articles, I tend, I never kind of really go into the sources. So when the Guardian or the Daily News in Swedish, a big newspaper, writes about now comes a new report about melting glaciers, I like scribble through it, but I never kind of click on the report and go to the source and read the abstract. And I think Greta said to me something like, you should do that, because sometimes that abstract is more worrying than the article. And I was like, no, journalists are always over exaggerating. Like, they are probably making it look worse. But when I actually started to do that more and more, I understood that no, like when you go into and you look at many of these reports, it actually makes you more worried, because you understand how profound the impact will be, and you understand how big the data is. So I think that's one thing which has really kind of changed me, actually. And then second of all, I think was just that I think I was a little bit inspired by Greta, in the sense that you don't like that you don't need that much, stuff and things, that it's actually fairly like nice to not kind of to just kind of live a little bit in your bubble. That can actually be fairly comfortable. So I think I buy a little bit less stuff.
I think it's nice to check what you need and not what you desire. And the next question is, if you ever did a future film on Greta, who would you cast to play her?
Oh, that was a really interesting. Of course, that person is probably not even born or very young today. So I don't know. I think if as I always say about this story, like, I don't know where it's going to end. And I think it's so soon to do like a fictionalization now, or, to do a biopic now. I think maybe like 2030, 2040. But today, who would play Greta? I think Emma Watson, could be a very good Greta if it would have been in the past. And I know she's also feels like a person who's very knowledgeable and really loves to study. And I think she's quit acting to study and focus on that, and have have chosen the academic career, which I think is a little bit Greta-ish. So maybe they have some connection.
The next question is actually a congratulations from Melita. Melita says, congratulations on the movie. I'm grateful to you for the comprehensive presentation of Greta. Now I experience Greta differently. The film will have a big impact on my thinking about the environment. Thank you, Melita.
Thank you.
And the next question is, at the beginning, the scenes look at each conference which the movie offers comes across somewhat reserved. Sorry, I have to see what the question actually is. But I see the next one. Do you still meet up with Greta occasionally?
Yeah, but I think we have mostly now, which we have contact over text messages. So it's not the same as when we filmed. It was a fairly long time ago since we were doing and filming this film. But we still have a little bit of contact, and we chat. If we see, an article or a topic that we know is interesting for each other, we kind of send it. But it's not the same way kind of as it was when we were filming.
Behind the scenes look at each conference which the movie offers comes across somewhat reserved in terms of offering a portrayal of climate topics on the table and the dynamics between other attendants and Greta. Was this a strategic choice to show how special, raw, and honest her ideas and calls for action are when compared to usual political green talk agendas?
I hope I understand the question correctly, but I think my feeling, I've never, been into these political arenas before. I've never filmed, in parliaments or in the United Nations or anywhere. But it feels very formal. And I think when Greta comes into that context, and many of these young activists come in and they talk truth to power, and they really, speak about these specific, very daunting, statistics, I think it becomes this contrast, because then the kind of very dry and slow moving political world, it just kind of drags along. And I think that was something I wanted to, because it was definitely something that I felt in these rooms. And I knew that Greta in her world felt that to a very large extent. So then I tried to kind of, in my way, from a more filmical kind of stylistic way, to create that by working with some sound design and also with some angles. I think one is when Jean-Claude Juncker is I think he's projected on these very big screen. I just felt, it feels like Greta is like a small person, and he's like the big person. So of course I had that kind of in mind in how I framed it, because I felt that was how she perceived those conferences.
And the last question from our audience is, what's up next for you as a director? What projects are you working on? Yeah,
many. After this, I have to. Now the United States wakes up, so then the last part of the working day comes. But I have many projects going on now, and many of them are not all, but some are related to climate change, and it's a topic which is just keeps on. Sadly giving. I would be very happy. I think everyone in the world would be so happy if there were no more of those movies to make. But sadly there are. But I can't tell you more about any specific project, because we're so early in development, and many of them are a little bit secret. But I'm hoping to present them to you guys in Slovenia physically in a few years. Instead of like this.
Actually, you haven't been to Slovenia yet, as you mentioned before, and unfortunately, we can't invite you now. How was this coronavirus pandemic infecting also the movie, the premieres, the movie festivals that you were willing to attend?
Yeah, but I think we have been lucky in that sense that we've been attending so many festivals, and we were actually releasing during when the pandemic was very low. So we were the film had premiered in Venice Film Festival, which was probably the only film festival that took place this year. So in that sense, we've been lucky, and it is a documentary that is really great on cinema, but it also works on streaming. So we've had really good figures globally, and so I think we were one of the lucky, I would say, films in that sense, that we have found our audience. But of course, it would have been much more fun, and even I think much more powerful and impactful if we would have been able to screen this film in cinemas and to talk about it in that kind of in that world.
Two short things for the end. First is also from Melita. Again, she says Greta's act was most sincere when she hung up the headphones in the EU Parliament. And Angel Lebinger is asking one thing more, just one more question. He says, people tend to think or argue her more emotional speeches are fake. What can you say about that from your point of view?
No, but I don't think, I don't even know how you define fake in that sense. I think she becomes very kind of, I think she said it to herself that, she feels so much for the issue, and then she really wants, to make it matter and make it count. And I think the film really shows that when you have to repeat your message over and over again, and you kind of do the same speech over and over again, and no one listens. I always says it's a little bit like when you're in a bad relationship and you tell your partner over and over again, please don't do this, please change this behavior, and nothing happens. Everyone knows what happens then. You lash out and you become emotional. And generally that ends up actually with you breaking up. But I think for Greta and the young generation, they can't break up with the entire political system and with their future. So then they make these speeches which become very kind of, lashing out instead.
Thank you. Hvala Anže za vprašanje. Thank you, Nathanom Grossmanom, for the talk, director of documentary Greta, available now also in Slovenia. Thank you. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you, Tony. It was a really big pleasure, and really good questions actually from the Slovenian audience as well. I'm so happy that you guys spent some time with me this evening.
Thank you, taksomiket, hvala. Hvala seveda tudi vam, drage gledalke in gledalci, tudi za zanimiva vprašanja, kot pravi seveda tudi naš tokratni gost Nathanom Grossman. Vabljeni, da razširite glas o filmu in o pogovoru z režiserjem, ki sta oba dostopna na Kinodvorovi spletni strani. Hvala za pozornost in prisrčen pozdrav.